There we go.
Nice.
All right. Welcome to Dad Mode, God, Grit, and Goals. And I am so excited about my guest today. Folks, we're in for a huge surprise, and I want you to buckle up because today we're shifting gears, literally. We've got someone who knows about balancing faith, family, and fast cars.
Yep.
Richard Siler. Now, we go way back.
We go way back, a long way.
And he's going to tell us about reigniting his passion about racing at the age of, what are you, 64?
65 now.
65.
Yeah. I should be drawing Social Security, but I'm not.
No, you're not. It's like you're starting a whole new career.
Exactly.
So just a quick intro. I don't even know if we remember how we met. You've got a much better memory
I do.
than I. Do you?
I totally remember. Yeah. So we were a member of the Wingman organization, and we were
Men's ministry. Yeah.
A men's ministry.
Yep.
And we got together over at the founder's home for a strategy session about Wingman. And Chad introduced you and I. And somebody said, well, you realize who that is? And I said, no. And they said, oh, it's Mike Tobias. And I said, the guy's an entrepreneur. He's into everything. You need to know this guy. And I was like, oh, really? And so that's how it started.
That's so funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a long
You
time
came
ago.
very highly recommended.
They didn't know what they were talking about, obviously.
Well, that's beside the point. Since then, it started a beautiful friendship.
Yeah. Well, I know that men's groups have just totally shaped my life.
Yes.
And you probably feel the same.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're invaluable. You have to have them.
Yeah.
And, for me, we moved to Dallas in 2000. And it was one of those situations where I don't know what it is about Dallas, but it's kind of clannish a little bit. And at least that's what I discovered. Yeah. I came from the Johnson Space Center area of Houston, where everybody knows each other. Everybody's got each other's back because sooner or later we're going to put, a handful of our colleagues on top of a small nuclear bomb and launch them into space. And so everybody's nice to each other.
That is funny. And I know, I'm already going to detour us a little bit because you do have an amazing family story in terms of being in Johnson Space Center and all of that. Yeah. So why don't you tell everybody about what?
Yeah, just really, really fortunate that I was born to parents who were born at just the right time. Yeah. And I had a dad who had an advanced degree in meteorology, which was unheard of back in those days. And he was approached by NASA when he was a very young man. He was 32. Yeah. Hey, come head up our weather operations, and we have absolutely no idea what we're doing, because back in those days, they were making up the rules as they went. They were all young guys, didn't know that you couldn't fly into space, supposedly, and so they were making up the rules as they went. And so my dad was part of it, and so, every once in a while, he'll show up in documentaries on, whatever, know, where it's like, there's my dad in mission control and stuff like that. So pretty cool. And my wife was also a NASA brat. Her dad did a lot of the initial design work on the Apollo spacecraft and the space shuttle. Yeah. And at the end of her street, this is the part that I just love. At the end of my wife's street was where Neil Armstrong lived.
Wow.
And so, everybody
Neil was just down the street.
He was just down the street. She played with Ricky Armstrong.
Oh, my God.
And one thing led to another. And, of course, everybody has carpools going to school and all this kind of stuff. My wife was driven to school by Neil Armstrong on multiple occasions. And, of course, she thought nothing of it because Mr. Armstrong works at NASA just like my dad does. Yeah. And so for her, it was like, no big deal. And I said, you realize that's kind of like having Christopher Columbus walk you to school.
Yeah. Now, I can imagine a 30-year-old right now is like Googling Neil Armstrong, trying to figure out,
right.
Who is this guy?
Yeah,
right. Help him out.
Yeah, first man to walk on the moon.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah. But it's really wild because growing up, I was friends with the sons and daughters of guys that are like really, really famous, and we don't really remember what a big deal those guys were, the original astronauts. Yep. And, LeBron James and people like that, they have nothing.
He hasn't walked on the moon.
He hasn't walked on the moon. Sorry. He did not sit on top of a 365-foot rocket with 7.5 million pounds of thrust and went straight up.
This is totally crazy. And it could just
just blow up.
Like that.
Small nuclear device.
All right. I'm going to ask you the question I like to ask, and that is, how has God, grit, and goals kind of impacted you as a dad when you think about that?
You know, it's really interesting because I've always, from a little kid on, I've always gone to church. I can't ever recall a time that I didn't go to church.
Okay.
However, what's really interesting is until we started going to our church, Valley Creek Church, I never really fully heard the gospel. I'd always been a Methodist, a Baptist, whatever. And I'm not dissing on those faiths,
right,
or those sects of the Christian faith.
Sex? Did you say sex?
SECT.
Oh, sorry. All right.
Yes, out of the gutter.
Caught my attention for a second.
Yeah. And but yeah, it's really interesting. That's when I really first heard the gospel, and
in a way that just struck you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it went from head knowledge to the heart.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And it changed everything with the way I lead my family, the way I conduct business, everything. And so that, plus you throw in the grit, which I would call perseverance. And,
Good.
It doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down. What's important is how many times you get up. Right?
Yep. For
and I think that if you go through life and you're actually trying, you're going to get knocked on your tail more than once.
Exactly. That's how we learn, right?
That's how you learn, right? Success is a horrible teacher,
Yeah.
but failure is a great teacher.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things that I keep trying to tell my kids. Look, you were taught in school that anything below an A is a negative, right?
Yeah, it's completely backwards.
It's completely backwards. In real life, you fail, you learn, and you get better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We expect our child to walk immediately. Stand up, walk. You're
Exactly.
You're 9 months old. You've got to figure it out.
Go. Yeah. By the way, here's a basketball.
Yeah,
Start
don't fail. What is wrong with you?
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and for some reason, as we get older, we think that isn't. That's how it's supposed to work. Never works that way.
Never works that way.
Yeah.
No.
So, how has your faith kind of guided your life decisions? You said it's changed.
Yeah, it changed radically. For the longest time, I was one of those ready, fire, aim guys, and always shooting from the hip. It'll work out. We'll make a decision. We'll course correct. We'll go on. And making a decision and going in a direction and then course correcting, there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found is that I was actually kind of blind. And so what I started doing is that I took a tip out of the life of King David. And if you go and you read the story about King David, he's always, David inquired of the Lord. David inquired of the Lord. I mean, it's there all the time. He was always asking God for that guidance. And if you think about like Moses was not qualified to lead the children of Israel, as we've recently learned. The only thing that qualified him was that God was with him.
Right.
And so that whole thing about, I'd rather be in the desert with God than in the promised land without him, that's become my motto. And so everything that I do, I am absolutely seeking the wisdom of the Holy Spirit is this really what you want me to go do?
Interesting. So I can imagine some of the people here are like, I don't hear from God. I don't know what you mean, like, go ask God.
Mm-hmm.
You hear from God. How do you have a conversation with God? Like,
so
how is that for you?
It's really simple. We were challenged years and years ago by our pastor, who made what I am convinced to this day was an offhanded remark, which was, if you're not inviting the Holy Spirit in every morning when your feet hit the ground, just say, Holy Spirit, I invite you in. What have you got for me today? That simple. And he said, the challenge was, do it for 6 months, come back and talk to me and see what you hear.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that within about 2 months, I was hearing little pieces of revelation that I was convinced hadn't come from me. And over time, it's become bigger and bigger as he said, hey, I need you to go talk to this person or minister to this person. I'm like, I don't want to do that.
So it's like a conscious is
Yeah.
it like you talking to yourself, only those words aren't mine?
Yeah, it's like, I know that's not me because
Right.
I know how I think,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And it'll be a word or two. But every once in a while, like at about 2 o'clock in the morning, I'll be half awake, half asleep, and that's when he really unloads on me.
Really?
Oh, yeah. And I'll get several things, and I'll go like, seriously?
Where did that come from?
Where did that come from? He actually, and we'll talk about it later, but he actually gave me a mission to go on, which I'm still on.
Mm-hmm.
And then he finished it up with a prediction of how my wife would do in a bodybuilding contest that she was 6 weeks out from.
Wow.
She was preparing and training for it and all that kind of jazz. And
yes, his wife is a bodybuilder.
My wife is a bodybuilder, and do not mess with her. And she was 6 weeks out, and I didn't say a word to her for 6 weeks about this thing because I didn't want to lead the witness,
Yeah.
Sure enough, man, we go and we do the show. She finished third. It just went down, just everything like what
I've seen
described.
this movie.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, I think I'm pretty sure I was
kind of like
God.
Put the cloth out and it's wet on one side. You flipped it over. It's like one of those deals.
Yeah, very much like that. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm supposed to do that. But you know what, Lord? I have questions.
And I think to hear from the Lord, you have to be in the Word, right? Because otherwise, where's it coming from?
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you got to know what His voice sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
It's not ever going to be condemning.
Cool. So can you share maybe a moment when faith was just like a tangible, tangible difference for you?
Well, I think, honestly, the latest story about the big tree.
Yeah.
This is crazy. I was visiting my mom and sister up in Ohio. They're transplanted Texans, and I had one of those deals where I was about 2:00 in the morning, and I was about half awake, half asleep, and I heard, I need you to go to the big tree and pray against fear, anxiety, doubt, skepticism, and distrust. I was like, okay.
Fear, anxiety,
doubt, skepticism, and distrust. And I was
at
like,
the big tree.
At the big tree. And you have to understand, this town that I was visiting, it was surveyed by George Washington. The trees are all 150, 200 years old.
They're all big trees.
But so like, okay.
Which one's the biggest?
Which one, And so get downstairs the next morning, and I look at my wife, and I said, well, here's the story. And I told her, and she goes, the big tree, which one is that? I said, I don't know, but he'll let us know, And so we kept walking, and we come to a big tree. No, that's not it. Come to another tree. No, that's not it. And we finally said, look, we're going to go to the gym on the college campus where my brother-in-law was a professor, and we're going to go work out. So we step on the campus, and we didn't walk 100 yards. And all of a sudden, here's this big tree with a sign on it that says big. And I took a picture of it, and I was just sort of like, you got to be kidding, really? But it's a marker stone moment. It means that I really am hearing the Lord.
Yeah. Such confirmation.
Yeah.
You showed me that picture.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a big sign. It
just
says big.
Big.
It was like, here, idiot.
Yeah. Well, and
I
he
told
knows,
you.
Yeah, I told you. And he knows how to,
Oh
how to
my
talk
gosh.
to me. He knows what he's dealing with. So
That's so funny.
yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to talk about, you've got such an amazing story. So I want to dive into a couple things. And really, this is kind of like twists and turns in your life and the
Sure.
road not taken. But you said you were down on yourself for a period of your life.
Yep.
And how did you move on from feeling down?
Yeah. So when I moved up here, it was a really interesting time. I went to work for Nokia, and was there. I was a business controller for their IT organization for the Americas. Pretty big job.
Wow.
And
That is a big job.
yeah, and I got there right when today we would say that the tech bubble of 2000 officially burst.
Mm-hmm.
Because my timing is always impeccable. And, all the stock.
Welcome to where everything used to be.
Right. Exactly.
It's no longer here now.
It's no longer here. And we're going to implode. And so that's what happened. Nokia imploded. They never were able to figure out a way to compete with like the iPhone.
Yeah.
Right.
You've heard of Apple. You've heard of Google.
Yep. Samsung.
Maybe the BlackBerry.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And then there's
Nokia.
Nokia. Yeah. And it's like,
They went the way of Motorola.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Just gone. And so like, I forget how many thousands of options that I had for stock options with a strike price of $77. And last I checked, their stock was trading below like 15. It's just like, who cares?
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, long story made short, moved the whole family up here. The job lasted 28 months, and I was out on the street. There was, I mean, we
How old
went.
were you?
See, I would have had to, I got to think about this. I was 44.
44, yeah.
Yeah. And so for the next 3 years, all I did was just hustle consulting gigs because the economy had blown up in Dallas.
Yeah.
There was nobody hiring. And so I'd pick up a 2 or 3 month gig here and 2 or 3 month gig there. I even went back and was, wrenching on racing go-karts to make ends meet. I hired myself out as...
And these are not go-karts, like, just so we're clear, that are, in some guy's garage so his kid can ride it in the driveway.
Right, that goes 20 miles an hour. No, these are, 100-plus mile an hour go-karts. They're full-on race cars. They're just really small.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was actually being flown around the country to train people how to drive the Acura NSX.
Oh, cool.
Which was fun.
I loved that car.
Love it.
Yeah. I had the book. It was a nice hardcover.
Yeah.
I pretended I had enough money to buy one.
Yeah. Yeah. And the crazy thing was, I mean, we would just pound that car around racetracks, right? And yeah, we went through tires and brakes like you can't believe, right? But I mean, the car itself just kept running. And after about 2 years, they knew I just loved that car. It was that fire engine red, with the black, what do they call the tops that would just lift off? It was like it's not the sunroof, but it was like a Target top.
Target top, that's right.
It's black, Oh, it was just gorgeous. And they said, yeah, well, we're getting ready to sell it. We'll sell it to you for $34,000. And I at the time I was bankrupt, right? Yeah. There was no way I was going to buy it. And I was sitting there thinking, $34,000. One of these days, that car's going to be worth a lot of money. It's worth a lot of money today.
I was going to say that was like half off.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I mean,
at that point,
what a car.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
So anyway.
So what role did your faith play in reinventing yourself? Where were you at then?
Yeah, I was just really down and depressed. I got into a really bad business deal that went sideways, and was accused of all sorts of things. And
as part of the consulting?
Well, no, it was a deal where it was here locally. It wasn't consulting, but it was just one of those deals where, again, ready, fire, aim.
Yeah.
I wasn't reading Proverbs on a daily basis and learning about the wisdom of God, that, wisdom comes from God and all that. And I got myself really sideways in a deal that I was half culpable and half set up.
Okay.
And so I wound up taking the fall on this business failing.
Yeah.
And wound up owing a lot of money and had to declare bankruptcy and all that kind of stuff. And I was borderline suicidal.
Yeah.
And so
that'll do it to you.
It will. It will.
Yeah.
It's just brutal. And so really feeling like a failure and all that. But fortunately, I was starting to get more and more plugged into the Wingman men's ministry.
Yep.
And I'll never forget one day I had been arrested on false charges, but I was arrested and I turned myself in and, was in jail for about 4 hours until I got out, and, all that. I was just a mess. And so anyway, about 3 days later, I get a phone call from our mutual friend, Big Robbie Marr.
Yeah.
And he says, "Hey, what you doing?" And I said, "Not much." He says, "I'm having a beer on my back patio. Why don't you come by?" I said, "All right." So I come in. He says, "Just go around through the fence. Don't bother coming through the house." I was like, "Okay." So I come through the fence, come around to the back. It's Robbie and Chad Hennings.
Yeah.
And Chad looks at me and says, "So understand you've been on TV." That's not the guy you want to be explaining anything to about,
Two Air Force guys that are over 6'5".
Yeah, over 6'5", and legends in their own right, and two of the finest men you'll ever meet, too, I'll add. And massive respect for both of them, and it's just sort of like, oh, man, And so I went in, and I didn't pull any punches. I said, look, here's where I screwed up. Here's where I got screwed. I'm going to do whatever it has to take, whatever I have to do, and get it sorted out. And so Chad listened to all that, and finally he says, "So what the hell were you thinking?" And I said, "Well, clearly I wasn't thinking." And he says, "Okay." And he says, "Now, how can we help you?"
Yeah.
Right.
Confession, repentance.
Yeah.
Right.
And then having brothers come stand by side by side and say, "Let's go."
Yeah, that's it.
right? And so
I think, not to interrupt, but so often, I think we don't want to confess.
yeah, oh
right?
yeah,
And you got to have men in your life. Men, not women if you're a guy.
yep,
Right? You should have your wife that you can have those conversations with and no other woman.
exactly,
Right?
exactly.
Because you need to be having those conversations with other men, godly counsel,
Yep.
who, and that's who these guys were for you. So
Yeah.
just real
On
clear.
that day.
Not only are they, really neat, cool guys with amazing backgrounds, but they're
Right.
godly men and they're godly counsel for
Yep.
you and me.
And you,
Yeah.
and you've been godly counsel to me too
Yeah.
on a lot of subjects, right?
Yeah.
Subsequent to that.
Yeah.
And so, you have to have those guys that are going to tell it to you like it is.
Right.
Like, what the hell were you thinking?
Right.
Slap you up. And it's like, man, I don't ever want to have that conversation again, ever.
Yeah. Right.
And so, but it was through the Wingman group where, they said, look, what you need to be doing is you need to be reading a chapter of Proverbs every day. There's 31 chapters in Proverbs, and on the longest month of the year, you got 31 days.
Yeah.
So read one chapter a day. If it's October 1st, then you read Proverbs 1. And you know what?
You're praying for February so you could take 3 days off.
Well, no, because then I have to read all three. The
Oh.
other three,
There's no out.
There's no out. You read 4 chapters on the last day. I mean, it kind of
There we
sucks.
go.
But anyway, whatever. And it's all good wisdom. But if you do that, the revelation that starts coming through, I've marked up my Bible like you can't believe, where it was like, yep, here's one that if I had known this, I wouldn't have gotten into the legal issues that I got into. Here's another one. And I mean, if you go through and you mark it down, dozens.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Right? And it's just sort of like
The ancient text. There's a lot of people that have been there, done that. And
Yeah.
there they are.
yeah, we haven't changed in 3,000 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And that's to hear God's word, you're in God's word, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, it all came out just fine, because what
Praise God.
right?
Yeah.
And but it sure taught me a lot of lessons.
Yeah.
So,
All right. Well, I'm going to give you some applause for that. That's not it. No, not that. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Good job. Yeah, that's awesome. I was looking at your website.
Yep.
You've got Teddy Roosevelt's speech on there. What does that mean to you?
So the man in the arena.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that it's, if you don't know the man in the arena, it's basically that only the people who actually are standing in the ring fighting the good fight, and they're getting hit and they're bloody and maybe knocked to their knees every once in a while, but they get back up and they keep going again. They're actually the only ones that have the actual legitimacy to say anything about what it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
Those who are spectators, they're just spectators.
Yeah.
And so as you go through life, as you try to dare great deeds, as Teddy would say, I love that, dare to do great deeds. It's
Right.
like, yeah, you were the man, and you look at his life, he did a lot of great deeds, right?
For sure.
And not just president. And so, he flat out says, if they're not in there doing it, A, don't listen to them, and B, they don't have any right to say anything anyway because they're just cowards.
Right.
They are. So, and so that means a whole lot.
It's not the critic that counts.
It's not the critic that counts.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So you've started this YouTube channel.
Yep.
You were a race car driver. Tell us about that real quick.
Yep.
And then kind of you had this period off and then you decided I'm going to start doing this again. So walk us through that.
Yeah. So it's really funny. I started racing karts when I was 14 years old. So it was a long time ago. Yeah. And
they were gas powered back then.
They were, yeah, actually methanol with nitromethane.
Really?
Oh, you should have smelled that fuel. Man, I tell you what, you could use it as a varnish, It was tough stuff, man. And anyway, so, man, I mowed lawns. I learned how to paint houses. I threw the Houston Chronicle newspaper. I did whatever it took to make enough money to go racing because It ain't like basketball where you can
And
go
this wasn't Mario Kart.
It was not Mario. This is the real thing, and I was going up against a bunch of guys that were state and national champions and all that. And I mean, I was just getting clocked every single time. Yeah. But I kept after it, and I got pretty good at it. I had been bullied starting in about the 4th grade when we moved to Texas, and the bullying went on for like 5 years.
Wow.
And it wasn't until I actually went to the lead bullier, and he was picking on me one day in 8th grade, and I just hauled off and punched him because I just couldn't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And back in those days, you didn't get in trouble for taking out bullies, believe it or not.
Right.
Well,
it's a quick solution.
It's a quick solution, and they kind of backed off.
Yeah.
And
even they don't really want to fight you.
They really don't want to fight me. But I was like 5'10" and 120 pounds. How much damage was I going to do? None. Right. But they just knew that I finally had enough, you know. Yeah. And so, anyway, what I found in racing was that was something that I did where I was actually pretty good at it, and it was unique and different, and I wasn't going to be compared to anybody else.
Right.
And so after a while, as I started winning races, and starting to realize, hey, you know what, I'm pretty good at this. I started developing kind of an attitude.
Yeah.
That honestly, any
confidence or a cockiness, or all of it.
It's all of it. Yeah. Cockiness, ego, you name it. I mean, bulletproof, all that stuff, all the stuff that we kid ourselves about when we were younger, right? And anyway, worked my way up, got into racing what's called Formula Ford, which is at those days was 2 rungs below Indianapolis.
Wow.
And so I was getting pretty close, won a championship in there, and it was time to take the next step to be 1 rung away from an Indy car.
That's incredible.
And that's when I ran out of talent and money at about the same time. And
talent and money.
Yeah, talent and money.
Those are both important.
Both are really, really important.
Probably the money even more, because you can get talent if you have enough money.
Yeah, if you have enough money, you can drive and drive and drive and get there, right? Yeah. And so what I learned is that as a 30-year-old, it's really hard to raise $250,000, which was the next level, which in late 1980s, what would 250 be today?
Probably,
$1 million? $1 million?
I was going to say 750 to $1 million for sure. Yep.
Yeah, and that's about what it costs today, right? And so it's wealthy kids or kids who have parents that are incredibly connected, who can have a manager and all that. My dad, he was a civil servant, and he did well.
Yeah.
I mean, he did really well. I mean, we had airplanes and all that kind of stuff, but not that kind of scratch.
Right.
Yeah. And so
it's a big leap between the go-kart and the
the
big car.
The big car, yeah, in so many ways, know. And so anyway, long story made short, I had to hang it up when I was about 30 years old.
But it was in you.
Yeah, it was still in me.
That never leaves.
And it never leaves. And I didn't know it at the time, but I went into this depression shortly, a couple years later. My son was born, and even though I had like this amazing father and amazing mom and had all this demonstrated to me what a great parent looks like, I had no idea what I was doing, right? Yeah. And then when my son was 11 months old, my dad died early. He died at 64. He had cancer, and that was it. And so here I was trying to figure out how to be a dad, struggling on my career a little bit. I was already struggling. This was before we moved up here, but there was some difficulties. And then the real thing is that the thing that I thought that I was going to do, the dream that I had and all that kind of stuff, wasn't going to happen.
Right.
And so I went into this massive midlife crisis. I wasn't interested in, some guys go out and chase women, or they go out and they'll buy themselves expensive jewelry or sports cars or whatever, right? To kind of numb that pain.
Sex, drugs, rock and roll.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, baby. All that stuff. Exactly, right? Yeah. And that wasn't me. It was just this deep, profound sadness. And it went on forever. I mean, it was at least 10 years.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing how that can just go by.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's
you
just
wake up.
Like,
whoa.
Yeah, my kid's 10. What happened, And so what I realized today, again, because of the teaching at our church, I had identified as a racing driver. Somebody had asked me, "Who are you?" I'd say, "I'm a racing driver."
Your identity, yeah.
Right. Well, if that identity is taken away, now what?
Now you're floating.
Yeah. Right.
You're in the chaos. I could be anything, I guess. I'm nothing.
I'm nothing.
Right.
Right. And so now I understand, not only intellectually but at the heart level. No, I'm a beloved son, And it took, I like really, really digging to get it from the head to the heart.
Beloved Son of God.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. That changes that.
That's so important.
It is.
All right. So take us to this decision. I know we're skipping a bunch of years here, but you're like, I'm going to start a YouTube channel. I remember we had a conversation about this.
Oh, yeah.
And you were like,
so this is crazy.
Yeah, go ahead.
So at the time, I was your typical global jet setting consultant.
Yeah.
Going to the same conference room anywhere in the world, the same hotel room. Yeah. Anyway, I was on a project up in Tacoma, Washington, and typical deal, about 2:30 in the morning, I was half awake, half asleep, and I got this message from the Holy Spirit that said, I want you to start racing again, and I want you to video it.
Wow. And
share it with other men, because too many men are sitting on the sidelines. He goes, there's too much talent sitting there, and I need them to engage. And I want you
We're the Walking Dead.
Right. Well, it could be.
Yeah.
Right? And I think some of the genesis of it is that I had been really noodling on Peter's first sermon, where he quoted Joel and said that your sons and daughters will prophesy, your young men will see visions, and your old men will dream dreams.
Yeah.
And it was like, I used to have dreams all the time.
Yeah,
what the hell?
Where'd my dreams go?
Where did it go? And what does that mean? Why that? And I realized that what happens is, as we get older, our dreams get sucked out of us because life just sucks them out for us.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. And you're just beat down.
Yeah, you're beat down, and I can't take another failure. I can't, all this kind of stuff. And so, so he made it very clear, throw in comedy and all that. Well, this was the state where I received the prophecy about Jennifer and her bodybuilding contest.
Oh, wow.
And so when she finished third, what that said to me was, damn it, I got to go do this.
She's doing it. I got to do something.
I got to go do something now. And I've got, and all this. And so I had a lot of questions. What does this look like? And I kind of stiff-armed God for a couple of years, literally a couple of years. And finally, I went out to a big race out in Las Vegas, and I'm walking through there, and there's part of me, the racer in me is like, oh, yeah, the competition. I remember this. I am so in.
Yeah.
And then I walked through the pits in other areas, and I saw some of the other stuff going on, the grit and the hard work, and it's not fun and all that. And I was like, I don't want any part of this.
That's funny.
I want my couch, one of those kind of deals.
The wise old man.
Right, exactly. And then I heard clear as a bell, no, I need you in this sport because there's people I need to reach.
Wow.
And I was like, damn it. All right, fine. And so within another couple months, I went out and
off you go.
Purchased a cart and
these aren't inexpensive.
No, they're not. They're not inexpensive, and they're, for people who don't understand, this is where racing drivers actually train.
Yeah, all the Formula One guys were karters first.
Yeah, Formula One, IndyCar, all these guys. That's kind of where they start. And when in the off season or when there's a break, they're back in their shifter carts and they're driving. And in this cart that I drive, top speed, if on a really long straightaway, probably 130 miles an hour.
Wow.
And
you're on the ground.
You're on the ground. You've got about an inch of ground clearance.
Yeah.
But it'll do 0 to 60 and back to 0 again in just over 3 seconds.
Wow.
And it'll pull about 4 Gs in the corners. And it's about that much on the brakes when you brake really, really hard. So, like, your neck muscles get just destroyed.
That's crazy.
And my heart rate for a race will go up to, 145, 150 beats a minute. So it's forced me also to, get in the gym, get in shape and all that. But nothing, it's like hockey, right? You can get yourself in really good shape, but nothing gets you in shape for hockey like playing hockey.
In a game, there you go.
And it's the same way with racing.
So how have people responded to your message now? You're getting an audience.
I am. I'm getting an audience. People come up to me and they'll say, "Are you the begin again guy?" And I kind of look at them. I go, "Maybe." Maybe. Why do you ask? One of those questions. And inevitably it'll be like, "Man, you've inspired me to go and do this." And because I make fun of myself, I've been failing failing, and it really hurts the ego.
Well, it takes guts to just get in there after being cold.
After all these years and all that, and everything happens so fast. And what's interesting is that the shifter cart, hands down, is more violent to drive than the Formula Ford that I was racing, even though the Formula Ford was much faster.
Interesting.
The shifter cart is just violent. I don't know. The vibration and the G-forces. And, I mean, you literally need to go, like seriously stretch and get in a whirlpool and work all the kinks out of your muscles and all that kind of stuff because it's just so physical.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Good for you. And I love the name. Begin again.
Begin again. Starting over.
That's what you decided to do.
Yeah.
So let's talk about racing and fatherhood. So, how does your family feel about all this?
So it's really interesting. Like Jennifer is beyond supportive. I have been blessed by an amazing woman, just as you've been blessed by an amazing woman who,
for sure,
right? I mean, she stands with us and supports us and all that. And really and truly, Jennifer would argue that she's not a Proverbs 31 woman. She would argue that Lisa, your wife, is a Proverbs 31 woman. But they both are
for
quite
sure
advanced,
yes,
as Proverbs 31 women. And one of the lines in that verse or that chapter 31 of Proverbs, it says that their husbands deliberate at the city gates with the leaders of the city.
Mm-hmm.
And really what that says is because they are so strong and they have so much taken care of that we can focus on strategy and what's our next steps and all that kind of stuff that would not actually be available if we didn't have a Proverbs 31 wife.
Yeah.
And it's pretty remarkable.
How about your kids? What are your kids?
My son is like, Dad, go kick ass. I'm going to come to the races when I can. And, you better show up as Dick, not Richard. And that's, and Derek, I mean, he's got this crazy sense of humor, right? And so, you can be Richard at church, but at the racetrack, I need you to be Dick.
That's funny. Yeah. Tell us about your kids real quick. Just got two kids at their ages.
Yeah. My son, Derek, is 32. Well, he'll be 32 next month. And just a delightful guy. I mean, he is got this sense of humor that's just over the top and yet just loves the Lord, high integrity, great character.
Yeah, he's a guy's guy.
He is. Oh, yeah, he's a man's man, jock all the way. You're not going to get him to sit still for very long.
Yeah.
But just a great guy. And of course, dear friends with your son, Colin.
Yep.
And I love the fact that our boys get together and they do together what you and I do.
Right, yeah.
Like, we need to check in.
Gen 2.
Yeah, right. Yeah, or mini-me or something. Right. I'm not sure. And then I have a 27-year-old daughter, Kayla, and man, that is one really solid girl. She figured out about 3 years ago that there was something different, that she was dealing with too much perfectionism and all this kind of stuff, and why did that bother her? And so she just said, you know what, I'm going to go. She went through the Face Your Giants series at church, and she said, I need to face whatever this giant is. I don't even know what it is. Turns out she's OCD.
Interesting.
And so she's been going to therapy and has gotten to the point where, as an example, she was so afraid to drive that I literally would ride with her and we would go past guys that are like mowing the grass in the esplanade of the road that we're going down. And she'd say, Dad, did I run one of those guys over?
Ooh.
And I'd be like, no. And she says, are you sure? I'm sorry, you did not touch anybody. She goes, I'm sorry, I've got to turn around and go back and make sure they're okay. And she literally would turn around and go back.
Oh, my word.
It was that extreme, right? She doesn't do that now. She can drive into Dallas, whatever, awesome, on her own, no big deal, all that kind of stuff. And so having that fundamental honesty and character, I love that about her. That's amazing.
Awesome.
Amazing.
All right. So any advice for any of our older listeners who are thinking maybe there's a hobby I should pick up?
Yeah. So you're never too old. I think that's the big thing. I'm able to go out there and do it. I've been able to stand on the podium at a race, finish third.
I saw that.
Right. And that was one of those deals where, you know, I was overjoyed, and then I got in the truck and I sat there and allowed myself to weep.
Yeah.
Because I didn't think it was ever going to happen again, you know.
Yeah.
And it was just a club race, you know, but it was a
No.
podium. You
Yeah.
know?
Doing
And-
what you love.
Yeah. And so if you've got if you've got a book in you, I've always wanted to write this book, man, just go do it.
Yeah.
You know, or go hike the Grand Canyon or whatever.
Yeah.
Do it.
This hit me because I've been on this journey for about 90 days right now and you said something I was a race car driver and then I was lost.
Mm-hmm.
You're a race car driver again,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's part of your identity. You're
Yeah.
beloved son of God,
Yep.
but you're also a race car
Yeah,
driver.
that's what I do.
Another identity.
Yep.
And I was catching myself saying I used to be an athlete.
Mm.
And I stopped saying that.
Yeah.
I am an athlete.
Yep.
Right. Because you can believe it. You could believe that you could be a race car. You could be a race car driver again.
Yep.
Right. And so I would say to anybody that wants to pick something up, whatever you're saying I used to do, you have to stop saying that.
Yeah.
And say I am that.
I am. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so once I said I'm an athlete, and then I had to embarrassingly say tomorrow morning I'm going to get up and I'm going to do 5 sit-ups and 5 push-ups because I'm disgusted when I look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And then I'm going to add 1 more a day.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
I did 90 yesterday morning.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So it's been 85 days.
Well, there you go.
And yeah, so crazy.
Good for you.
Crazy.
Yeah. I love it.
All right. Let's talk about the ups and downs of business real quick.
Yeah.
You've kind of had this roller coaster journey. I know we touched on that. How did you deal with the emotional kind of toll of declaring bankruptcy?
Not well to start off with. To be
that's got to hit your identity.
Yeah, it sure does. And, you know, as men, we want to be good providers.
Yeah.
We want to be viewed as successful. Nothing that quite drives home the whole fact that you're bankrupt. And then the other part, which was really, really hard, is that at the time, the Chapter 13 trustee only accepted cashier's checks. Couldn't do it by wire, couldn't do it electronically. You certainly couldn't write a personal check. You had to go to the bank and have a cashier's check.
Mm.
And so to do that for 48 months?
For anything.
Well, no. Just the payment, the monthly payment that you had to make. Because, you know,
monthly payment to the
trustee.
Oh, gotcha.
Who would then take the money and then distribute it
to the folks.
Right.
Yeah.
And
your debtors.
Right.
Yeah.
And you have to understand.
Creditors.
Creditors, yeah. In my case, the only debt I had was my house.
Mm.
Everything else was free and clear, right?
Yep.
But the amount that I owed every month was basically another house payment. So I was making 2 house payments every month.
Ouch.
And I had to go in and tell the 20-year-old, you know, college kid who's a finance major who happens to be working behind the counter, yeah, I need you to cut me a check for $1,834 to the Chapter 13 trustee.
Yeah.
And talk about crushing your ego after a while. It got to the point where it was just like, man, I just hate this.
Yeah.
I can't.
It's like going to confessional every week or
Yeah.
month or whatever.
Every month you go in and confess, yes, I failed.
Yeah.
You know, and so.
Thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, thank you for the reminder. You know, shut up, kid. You know, one of those kind of deals. And so it was really tough. And what happened to me is that eventually I wound up going to my present employer. I was actually asked by a former colleague of mine who happened to be a partner at the consulting firm that I was working for. He had gone to work for the company that I work for now. He was a vice president, and out of the blue, he said, hey, there's a job in Dallas that's opened up. I don't know if you really want to go back to corporate America, but it's open. I think you would be really, really good at this job, and I think you'd be really happy at this company. I was like, I'll do it for you. I really don't want to go back into corporate America, but I'll do it for you. So I spent 3 months interviewing with all of these executives at this company, and I was like as loose as a goose because I didn't care whether I got hired or not. Right? Could not have cared less. And I was about 2 months into the process, and out of the blue, a mutual friend of ours who was a missionary over in Germany, Greg Strange, sends me this email. I hadn't talked to him in probably 2 or 3 months. He didn't know I was interviewing and all that. And it was just this prophecy over me about, you're going to get this job and you're going to be promoted before you know it, and you're going to be prospered and, blah, blah, and all this stuff. And I'm like, holy cow, this is amazing. And so I go walking in. It was a Tuesday night. And I walked in. I was doing some sort of serving deal at a church. And here comes Jason Hillier, another one of our pastors. And he looks at me and he goes, what on earth has happened to you? And I told him about this message from Greg. And he goes, well, he says, let me put it to you this way. I wouldn't put it in the bank, but you might as well put it in the bank because Greg talks to Jesus every day. And sure enough, about a month later, I got my job offer. And I'd been sent down to get some groceries down at Walmart or something, and got the phone call from the recruiter. And I just knew I was going to be lowballed and, all this kind of stuff. And they said, well, all your interviews went really good, and we're looking at your resume and your connections and all the stuff that you have done and do and all that. And, we think this level that we're bringing you in at is inappropriate. So we're going to bump you two grade levels and titles.
Wow.
And, we can't give you a signing bonus in cash, but would, $8,000 in stock be okay? And I mean, on and on and on. And I was like, what did you say? It was one of those kind of, and of course, I'm thinking about this prophecy that Greg came in with. Who gets promoted before they're hired, right?
Yeah.
And so,
it's crazy.
Just the goodness of God, and so that's been like restoring us.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So I don't want to leave this kind of segment here without. I've got to believe there's some listeners right now that are going through some financial hard times.
Yep.
They're looking in the darkness.
Yeah,
right.
It's tough.
What are some practical handles that you can share with them?
So as bad as it may feel, it will eventually be over. Never lose faith. And I almost did. I was borderline suicidal at one stage because I didn't think it was ever going to get over with. Yeah. Really, really lean into God. Don't think of God as being anything other than good to you, because it's the world that's doing it to you. Yeah, you made mistakes probably, and I certainly made my share of them. But there were some circumstances. I mean, it all began when Nokia imploded. Yeah, that wasn't my fault.
Right.
But
life happens.
Life happens, and just recognize it, and you just have to keep grinding and digging, and eventually you're going to get there.
Yeah.
And
how did the conversations go with your wife? How did the conversations go with your kids? Did your kids know about this? How old were they, and what was going on?
So Derek was around 15, which would have made Kayla around 10 when it first happened. Yeah. We had a car repossessed, and all that kind of stuff, because one of the cars.
So there were some outward, clear signals,
and so it was. Yeah, they were fully aware of it. Jennifer and I both. We were like, look, we both agreed to buy too much house because we thought, everything was always going to go up.
Yeah.
And we just made some fundamental mistakes that were based on either arrogance or hubris. Would that be the word?
Yeah. That's too big of a word for me.
I know.
Hubris.
Yeah. Hubris, right. And so, the belief that it was always going to do nothing but go up.
Up and to the right. That's
right. Up to the right.
Every projection.
Yeah, exactly. And no, it's a squiggly line, right? And you need to be ready for those down lines. And the other part is there's a proverb, which, of course, I wasn't reading Proverbs back when I had to declare bankruptcy, but it's the old deal is it says something along the lines of the debtor is the slave to the lender.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, my God, I'm so enslaved.
I feel like a slave. Yeah.
And so Yeah, it was really it was one of those deals where I needed to be humbled, I needed to be broken, so that God could use me again.
So I don't know if you found this, but I've got a similar story, right? So
Sure.
We live in a nice area. You live in a nice area. You could do some stuff for your family, right? Everybody is, we're depends who you compare yourself to, right?
Yep. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But you could buy your kids things. You can do things.
Yep.
And then, so if you want to raise your kids to not be little greedy
Minions
and spoiled, right?
Yep.
You have to set boundaries, right? It's like,
Yeah, you do.
Right. We live in an area where it's not uncommon for a 15-year-old to get a Mercedes-Benz for their birthday because you're going to be 16 next year, right?
Yep.
It's like, okay. And what I found is that when we had money, you had to kind of be the bad guy because you had to set those bounds.
Yeah.
When you don't have money,
it's easy.
We can't.
Yeah.
Right.
End of story.
And suddenly we're on the same page. Let's work together. Like, let's figure this out together.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of remove God from the equation when we have means.
Yep.
And when you don't have means, God's suddenly in the equation because let's pray about it and see what happens.
Yep.
Right. And I found that in our family. It really actually brought us very close together. Did you find your family getting closer together?
I think anybody who knows my family would say we're a very tight-knit family, just like you guys are.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we did, and again, this is really, really got started when we went to Valley Creek is that because we were still dealing with the bankruptcy and all that kind of stuff, it didn't matter how much money that I might bring in, because you can remember I was an independent consultant for a while, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's feast or famine, right?
Right.
Didn't matter how much I brought in. If it was a $200 check, guess what? $20, I was tithing it.
Yeah.
Regardless. Tithe gross.
Yeah.
And what's happened now is, we do tithe gross, but we also look for opportunities to give generously.
Yeah. And you do.
And so
you guys are very good that way.
Well, what? It's fun because, we have a mutual friend named Big Tony. We'll just call him Big Tony. Big Tony's in the mortgage business, so he ain't doing so good now, but the boy can cook.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my gosh, he can cook.
That's why he's Big Tony.
That's why he's Big Tony. And so when we find out that a family's got COVID or they're dealing with cancer or they lost some, family member, whatever the case may be, I call up Big Tony. I said, "Yo, Tony, I need you to make me a dinner." and so we've made this little ministry. I mean, it's like so laid back and unorganized because it's me and Tony, so it's not going to be real organized. But you know what? It's the easiest thing in the world to go and bring this massive platter of amazing lasagna here.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And it's amazing what it does for people. So, yeah. But that's an easy way to do it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So what are maybe some handles that you would give just based on your experience, kind of everything you've been through, looking back, raising your kids, what advice would you give to a dad right now that's 30, 40 years old who's got young kids, kind of trying to make his way in this crazy world?
Right. Number one, it's not easy, and just call it for what it is. You and I were talking the other day. If you look at it simply from a biology, earthly parent kind of thing, everybody has a father. Not everybody has a dad, right? And there's a lot of times when you'll come home from work and it's been a tough day and you're beat up and all that, and you really just want to be on the couch, but your kid wants to go out and shoot baskets. That would be Derek, right?
Yeah.
And so you go over to the schoolyard and you're whooped and you're tired and all that kind of stuff, and he doesn't want to leave until either the lights go out or he hits a swish from the 3-point line, right? And when the kid's 10 years old, a swish from the 3-point line, that's a shot, man.
Yeah, and we're waiting a while for that one.
I'm going to be waiting a while, right? Be okay with that. Be the spiritual leader. And Jennifer has never fought me on being the spiritual leader of the family. It's something that I didn't know I was supposed to do when I was 30 years old.
Yeah.
I didn't know to do it when I was 40.
What does it mean practically? What is that?
I think that the spiritual leader of the family is more than the guy that says we're going to church or we're praying before dinner. It's the guy that goes and models, hey, I'm going to give you a series of values, not rules, because I can never make enough rules, right?
Yeah.
But I can give you values to guide through your life. And so, man, that's what I hope that I've been able to do, is give some really good values that my kids can then hang on to.
Right.
You know, even the whole thing of there are good friends, and then there's your godly friends, and you want to spend more time with your godly friends than your good friends, because your good friends could be too good for you, and you could have too much fun with them. We all have that. We all have at least one of those friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your godly friends, they'll go with you to the door, and then they'll go, we're gonna wait here.
Go,
right. Why don't you wait with us?
Yeah. Or they'll say, what the hell were you thinking?
What are you doing? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good godly men friends.
Yeah. And because you know how it is. You know, you see your kids come in with their friends, right? And you're kind of thinking, nah, I don't think so.
Yeah.
You know, one of those kind of deals. The other thing that I did, more with Derek than with Kayla, but I made sure that he's got a bunch of surrogate uncles.
Yeah.
You're a good example of that, right? I mean, you've spent enough time with Derek to have made an impression on him, right? And
because our kids will listen to someone else more than they'll listen to us. Right.
You know,
we know this.
We know that. and so Derek's this guy that walks around that's got, I bet you he's got 7 or 8 surrogate uncles.
Yeah. That's what I said when he's a guy's guy.
Right.
We all love him.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and I'm sitting there, and you know, my dad, you know, he kind of shared his friends, you know, and I mean, he had some pretty interesting, you know, guys with doctorates in solar physics at NASA and stuff like that were like amazing guys. But it was never, hey, let's go have a beer and what's going on in your life, you know, one of those kind of deals. So,
yeah, when I think about the spiritual leader aspect, I think you hit the nail on the head. The difference between a father and a dad, and is recognizing that there's a spirit in your home. Yeah. Right.
Yep.
That's the thing that we sense. And you could have your kids may be home, especially if they're older, but you're not close. You know that.
Right.
And so what are you doing about it?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're really good at that. Because I know you've got great relationships with your kids. Yeah. And I think being that spiritual leader says that I'm going to lead. I got to go first. And so if there's distance between us, I've got to close that gap.
Yeah. That's very profound. Yeah.
Right? Because they're not going to close that gap.
Right.
And I got to recognize there's a gap.
Yep.
Right. And then what spirit am I going to bring into the situation? Right. I could bring in the spirit of anger, fear, whatever it is.
Right.
Or I can bring the spirit of a relationship.
Right.
Of love, joy, peace, kindness. Yep. Right. The fruits of the spirit.
The fruit of the spirit.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think that's a good kind of measure. All right. Well, you've got an amazing channel. Let's talk about how people can get connected with you and
sure. So
how they can begin again.
Yeah, begin again. So that's the name of the channel, Begin Again. Now, full disclosure, I am the typical dad who is out of touch with like pop culture. Turns out there's a Taylor Swift song called Begin Again.
Oh, is there?
So if you just type in Begin Again, you're going to get
a Swiftie.
You're going to be a Swiftie, and and you'll be able to tell the difference between me and Taylor pretty quick.
So we write like car or something else?
It's really begin again shifter carts.
Okay. I think I put in racing, and I think I got it pretty
you
quick.
found it, yeah. And really there's a lot of videos in there that, while they may be about racing, there's other videos that are more about experiences. Like we've done a couple of videos this year about a couple of vacations where I was just so burned out from work, just burned out. Yeah. And I just was like, Jennifer, we're gone. Yeah. And I take a camera just because I take a camera with me wherever I go now, because it's like stuck to me, you know. And next thing I know, I'm shooting a video about going down to the Florida Keys. Oh, wow. Never been there before, you know. And so it was like, well, what's this like? Well, it turns out it's very different than what I imagined it to be. But talk about laid back. There's only 2 speeds down there, first and reverse. There's nothing else. I mean, it is laid back. So it was, but that's exactly what I needed. Yeah. You know, I forget how much we slept the first couple of days that we were there, but I mean, both of us were so exhausted.
Just clunk.
Just done. And then
Brenna said athletes need sleep.
Yeah.
So there you go.
That's right. And you know, that brings up a great point. We, you know, again, our friend Chad, his daughter is a trainer. Yeah. Really gifted in what she does. And so I did 3 parts. Yeah, that was good. Episodes with her. Just, okay, what do? You know, and so she's great.
That's awesome. All right. Well, Richard, it was been a blast.
I loved it.
Thank you so much for being on our show. And God, grit, goals, you've got them all.
Well, thank you.
And it's a journey. And brother, I love that we have the relationship that we've got. And
likewise.
Our sons are friends. And
that's right.
Yeah.
And our wives.
And our wives, for sure. Yep.
Yeah, it's really an amazing thing when you can have 2 families come together and everybody likes each other. Yeah. And gets along and cares about each other and all that.
You got to do life together with other godly families.
That's right.
All right. Thank you for watching today. We love you. And remember, God is good. Jesus has forgiven me. I am loved and everything is possible.
Exactly.
All right.